closing conversation, risk,
Great.
expectation, and reception. Um, so all of the intentions are there. Relationships have been established, and finally the work is made public, and it didn't work, or they didn't get it, or it just didn't have enough time, resources. How do artists, organizations, and community deal with failure or incorporate that learning into the long-term process? I'd almost say, how do we pursue failure for the benefit of the learning in the long-term process, too? Each of the panelists will have 7 minutes to speak on a topic. We'll then ask questions of the panel and open it up to a Q&A. So for your remarks, think about the ideas of risk and failure. We're kind of pushing the idea that, failure is one way into breakthroughs, into changing the ways we've been doing it in the past. And we've asked our panelists together because they speak to multiple viewpoints in this ecosystem, especially audience, community, and organizer. I'm interested in how the positive experiences in one role reinforce positive actions in another. Unfortunately, Assata Richards could not be with us today. So, and Jack, of course, is an artist. I'm sorry. So we do have on the panel Jack Young is a University of Houston associate professor and Houston Shakespeare Festival artistic director, and he has acted in numerous productions and has had title roles in Macbeth and Richard III. He was nominated for Best Actor in a Leading Role for his performance as Shylock in Speed Merchant of Venice with LA's Action Theater Company. Mr. Young has directed over 120 productions, including Hamlet, Flea in Her Ear, and the New York City premiere of Youssef El Gundi's Hostages. Stephanie St. Sanchez is by any means necessary media artist, movie maker, and instigator. As founder of La Chicana Laundry Pictures, she has made over 25 award-winning genre-bending shorts. She has also started the Senorita Cinema Film Festival, the only all-Latina film festival in Texas. She also served on the board for Q-Fest, Houston's International GLBT Film Festival, and has worked with Houston Cinema Arts and Gender Real Houston. She is a recipient of SWAMP's Emerging Filmmakers Fellowship, the Idea Fund, and Lawndale Artist Studio program, and has been honored as one of Houston Press's 100 Creatives. And Dana Whitco currently directs the Tisch Initiative for Creative Research at the Tisch School of Arts in New York, a new strategic initiative designed to catalyze, nurture, and promote the research praxis of Tisch faculty, students, and staff. In her capacity as the first research office in Tisch's 50-year history, Dana works with Tisch's diverse stakeholders to formulate new opportunities for research, to deeply integrate artists into the intellectual life of the university, and to strengthen Tisch's capacity as an incubator for innovation and collaboration. She is also the co-founder of Positive Feedback and founding director of the Center for Creative Research. Okay, so I have Jack, and then Stephanie, and then Dana, and then we'll open it up to questions across each other, and then speak to the audience as well.
Cool. I get to go first. The question was one that, puzzling around, I went, okay, the F word, I'm not sure if I'm up for that. Because I don't know that, my students fail because they make an attempt, and we've said what the thing is to do, and then there's the bar, and the bar is already established, so having established the bar, and they miss it, I guess that counts as a failure, even though sometimes it's a mistake and sometimes it's a creative opportunity. But to embrace the question for as it is, I guess where I overextended the line, I guess is probably the deal. I ran a company in Greenville, South Carolina called the Warehouse Theater, and Greenville is midway between Charlotte and Atlanta. It's New South. BMW is in that area, Bose, Siemens, other number of places. And the company I ran was pretty much set up for folks who had an education and were around and were intellectually curious and adventurous in certain ways, but found themselves in the upstate of South Carolina. So at a certain level, they were ready to embrace cool things and interesting things. But if you dropped a bunch of F-bombs, they weren't going there. So they were of the mind to take on certain things and certain topics, and were interested in work of a certain strength, but just don't offend my grandma. So that turned into an interesting kind of thread to try to manage. And I think I caught, well, my dad's from Jersey and my mom's from Virginia, so I'm bilingual, so I can catch both of those tracks in a certain way. And we were doing very well, and the work was going well and was received well. Again, with all those foreign nationals in the area, there'd be nights in our lobby that people would be speaking French or, Michelin was the other big employer in the area, so it was the North American headquarters for Michelin. So folks from France and Germany and Denmark were always around, and we were the place they could come to get something with some meat on the plate. And things have been going well. Found it, was working the right line. Actually, the money's working the right way. I pulled the company out of the financial ditch, so things are going pretty well. And so now I'm going to try to do a play called The Swan. No? Okay. Elizabeth Egloff decided to take most of the myths around the swan and blend them into one play. And I thought it's a beautiful text, and I think it's a terrific thing. And I had a wonderful cast. And we put it together, and it's very magic realism, perhaps. A woman is having an affair with a milkman, and it's not going well. And one night, there's a big storm, and a swan flies into her plate glass window and breaks it and is stunned. And she brings the swan into the house and puts it on her sofa and doesn't know what to do. And then she wakes up the next day, and the swan has taken human shape. And it's a man. It's the Zeus, Lena idea, that kind of thing. And yet it's a swan, only it's in human form. And so, but he has fallen in love with her and learns to speak language, and the milkman's going, I thought we were having an affair. Who's the guy talking like a swan? And it was a beautiful production. It was wonderful, lovely, tremendous, and half the audience was ecstatic by it, and the other half was, don't ever do another play with an animal in the title. And it was a very curious thing, because some people I would have expected to be saying that. The Citadel is a university in South Carolina? Nobody? Okay, the Citadel is the one military academy that isn't the West Point. And the men who wear the ring get things done. And so they're very big fundraisers and corporate types in Chamber of Commerce. Even they were half and half. Half the guys were like, that's the coolest thing I've ever seen. And the other half were, don't ever do a play with an animal in the title again. And the same with some of the women. We had a very strong literary group that was always buying out nights to come see plays about Dorothy Parker and things. And half of them were, oh, that's so lovely, it's so wonderful, I'm so glad you did that. And the other half, don't ever do another play with an animal in the title again. So I guess my takeaway was go for it. I mean, even in doing it, it probably was more along the lines of the George Bernard Shaw thing. The worst thing is not somebody hating it, it's somebody being indifferent. That I probably would have been the bigger failure, is if I did something and people went, thanks, that was nice. Anything else? While the failure seemed in a certain way, those folks who were most adamant about don't ever do another play with an animal on the title, and were quite adamant. Some of them on my board, anytime I brought up a play, going, yes, this play has an animal in the title, but it's not the same. It's not. It's a different thing. It's okay. It's all right. The strength of their response against it, I think, was some of the proof in that it was worth the risk. So that's my story. Oh, I got 2 minutes. No, how many minutes? The clock went off. Great. Oh, it's unplugged. Good.
Let's just say 7. Okay, let's just say 7. Okay. I'll put this in my purse for later. By the way, I have like 2 of them already. It's very, 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 very polite. Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay. So when Sixto approached me to do this particular panel, I was like, "What are you trying to say?" Because much like Marsha Brady, I am so good at so many different things, and I very rarely experience failure. Well, that was until Wednesday night. So Wednesday night, as you may know, it was April Fool's Day, and I had this brilliant idea to do a show called April Fool's Fiesta, K-Tel Hell. Did anybody go? Anybody? Show of hands. Thanks, all 3 of you, for. See what I'm talking about, okay? I blitzed the social media. I had a fantastic concept, K-Tel Records. I was gonna play nothing but K-Tel Records the entire night. And then I was gonna show relevant commercials from the era. And there was food and booze. How could you go wrong in Houston, Texas on a Wednesday night from 6 to 10? I don't know. Where was everybody? I understand some people have sick parents or cramps. I understand all these excuses because I've used them myself. Um, but it led me to think that, you know, even though you think that you're really helping society, because I did, I think that it's important to entertain as well as educate, kind of. I consider myself a bit of a historian of pop culture that nobody really cares about anymore. Can't tell hell. So when no one showed up, I was like, you ungrateful, you Houston don't even know. And of course, my first reaction was to, you know, get on the Facebook and say, that's it. You know, I quit. That's, see what you did?
You'll never ignore me again.
Yeah. But then, because I was, and the thing is, I'm also a vinyl DJ. So loading up all this equipment and putting it in the car after like 8 people were there. Okay, I'm not going to exaggerate. 4 people were there. You know, and what's worse is that your hardcore supporters, people that, you know, are always down for you, you know, they're there, they're wearing the shirt, they're all excited, they're volunteering, and no one shows up. It makes you look like you got a, you know, like you're a weak crew or something. You know, it's like, one of my favorite movies is The Warriors. Okay, I'm not going to do too much of that, but something along those lines. And so it, you know, it kind of hurts you in that capacity. You take it personal, and you can. But I was getting in the car, and I was telling my wife, I was like, that's it, I'm never doing it again, you know. And she's like, okay, well, you know, just, you know, the people that were there were the people that were supposed to be there, and, you know, God bless her, she's sweet. You know, and I'm just going to go to bed after I eat this ice cream sandwich. But the thing is that, you know, the more I got to thinking about it, I think that especially in Houston, that there is so much going on every night. Even though I did double, triple check and no one was doing shit for April Fool's Day. There's just so much going on. And then also, I think our artists, you know, we tend to cannibalize, you know, the audiences, because we're all like multidisciplinary now. You know, we're not just doing theater. We're doing theater with a DJ party, and, you know, we're just throwing all this spaghetti on the wall. And some people have to work, or cramps, or whatever, or a grudge, whatever. So, and also, I began to think about it. So I went to the store and I got a 40, and I looked at the counter, and you know they have the take a penny, leave a penny. I realized I haven't been leaving any pennies, right? And if you don't leave any pennies, then how do you expect someone to leave you a penny, you know? And I was thinking that because it's true. I hadn't been going to any of my friends' events. And these are friends, these are people that I'll read something and go, oh, that's fantastic. Oh, what a great, you know, that's going to be a great event. And I'll have a sick relative or cramps, or, you know, my cat just is really enticing and I can't leave, or for whatever reason. But truly, I'm working on my own things as well. And that can be, you know, when you're an artist, you start working on something and it's just your life. You lock yourself in the editing cave and you turn off the phone except for Facebook. And so that's what's left with. But I was really disheartened, and then Friday came along, and I had an event Friday. It wasn't my event; it was the Frida thing at the East End. Did anybody go to that? Not Frida, the Selena thing. Okay, thank you. Love you, Selena. You're great. So, well, I didn't expect this particular crowd anyway, but not saying how that is. But there was over 500 people there throughout that time, and but since I was DJing and trying to sell merch, and I didn't get a lot done, but it was a successful evening for those that enjoyed that evening. I didn't make much money, but that's fine. So I was sort of like about that one. But then Saturday night happened, right? And Saturday night, I usually don't do live performances, but I did do one for 12 minutes max at Diverse Works. And I was feeling really nervous and kind of down about the shitty week that I'd had. And I just went on, I did, you know, what I do or whatever, and it was a packed house. And this had nothing to do with me promoting it or anything, or for whatever reason, other people were there, and it was great. And so it's sort of like, oh, you know, it's hit or miss. I mean, there's no formula. You can have the best intentions, you can have the best show, the best concept, the best idea, the best people, and promote the hell out of it. But people just won't show up for some reason. I still don't know the solution. I imagine that you just keep on making stuff, you know, just trying to do the best work that you can do. Because at this point in the game, are you really going to go back to school and become a pharmacist, Stephanie? Really? No. You know? I think that's 7 minutes. Okay, so there you go. So good.
That was a hard act to follow, so I haven't been a performer in a long time, so I'm going to read, and y'all can feel supportive of me while I try and follow my colleagues here. All right, so first of all, I want to thank Sixto, who I think may have just left the room. Oh, there he is. God, he's so sneaky. He moves around like a ninja. Thank you, Sixto, for the invitation to join your community today. He said it! I'm really grateful for the opportunity to learn about your community today, who you are, Houston. Like Paul, I learned first thing that you're very early and prompt, which was nice. I've been observing all the ways in which it seems to me that as a community you really function, which is just a great thing to notice. So thank you for having me. I'm learning a lot. I can't wait to go back to NYU tomorrow and share some of what I've learned, especially how to think about an academic institution vigorously assuming its role as in service to its local arts community. So thank you for that. Okay, my presentation. One of my human/art heroes is choreographer, writer, educator, mother, humanist Liz Lerman, whose name was mentioned earlier today. Liz has spent a lot of time thinking and writing about the limitations of hierarchy. I've suggested to Liz that there's even a danger in framing human activity, especially human creative activity, in hierarchical terms, that hierarchy, high and low, bad and good, success and failure, is disruptive to our creativity. It's an obstruction to meaningful connections, and it creates the conditions for violence. So when Sixto asked me to create, to do some thinking about risk and failure, the values of both, as well as the consequences of doing something quote unquote risky, and the consequences of doing something that quote unquote fails, I couldn't help but invoke Liz's idea of spectrum thinking. Some of you may be familiar with this proposition, which seeks to unmoor polarized binaries and instead settle our activities along a horizontal spectrum. In Liz's cosmology, the spectrum allows her to work deeply in different areas and reject the notion that art making is better or more important or valuable than engaging with community, or that engagement with community is better or more important or more valuable than art making. As a steward and aggregator of resources, I have also wrestled a lot with hierarchy because the task of evaluation is baked into my professional work. But evaluation is often binary. Did it succeed? Which is up here. Did it fail? Which is down here. Here's the essential question. How do we know? What are our criteria for defining failure or success? What does the container of those definitions look like? Is it wide, flexible, permeable? Can something be both a failure and a success simultaneously? I don't know, you had 50-50. That seems pretty good. Or is the container narrow, rigid, solidly boundaried? Who do we invite to the table to help us develop the criterion for defining our work as successful or failed? And once we've labored to the point of having a language of evaluation or measurement, how often do we really hold ourselves to a rigorous analysis based on those criterion? Or do we often mean to do that and instead get caught up in the turbulent emotional aftermath following a project, a performance, a program, and end up relying on our often unreliable sense, in quotes, of whether something succeeded, with or without ice cream sandwiches and a 40? When I worked as a funder, we often used this question to elicit honest reflection from prospective grantees. What has been your most spectacular failure to date? And if you could turn back the clock, would you repeat or change your course of action? Spectacular failure. The answer we were looking for is embedded in the question. We were not asking for the most miserable or dreary or painful failure. And the fact that we were asking about turning back the clock gave away part of the answer we were looking for, which is that there is something to learn from having done the thing, even if the outcome is not at all what we had originally imagined. I think we would all like to believe that we are the artists, the organizers, the advocates who would provide a bold answer to such a question. But I can tell you that not many did. Hearing that a theater company missed its marketing goals by XYZ percentage was not the answer that we were looking for. It was the organizations who reported an institution-wide investment in a risky artist or a risky work that had the richest stories to tell us about how they embraced risk as an opportunity to forge new relationships, to connect with audiences and communities in a new way, and to re-envision some aspect of their work. But it was also these organizations that understood that the metrics they would be using in this risky endeavor could not be business as usual. Does a ticket sales target give us any information about the making of meaning? Does a number of participants in a program tell us anything about the people who were deeply impacted? The last thing I want to say about risk is related to the job that I had before the job I have now. Along with 12 artists, 11 choreographers, 1 theater director, I was a co-founder and director of a now dormant enterprise called the Center for Creative Research. Note the foreshadowing. The core work of CCR was to support the research praxis of its founders and their collaborative engagement with investigators from other fields, including the humanities, the social and natural sciences, etc. In partnership with a group of higher ed institutions, including the University of Maryland, the University of Minnesota, Dartmouth College, Wesleyan University, to name a few, we set out to create a new research-oriented space in the Academy for arts practitioners, positioning artists as researchers within the Academy and using the catalytic potential of these quote-unquote outsiders to strengthen existing connections between institutions and their communities and just unleash all kinds of potential. I'll skip the glorious middle and go straight to the gory end. 7 years into a 10-year trajectory, our host institution and our key funder determined separately but at the same time that the center would not be sustainable without significant infusion of capital from the other, right? So the university was saying more money on the table, and the funder was saying more skin in the game. Sidebar here, I just want to acknowledge that Roberto and Debbie, thank you for puncturing the myth of sustainability. Thank you for that. So 3 years earlier than planned, CCR folded up its wings and now sits in a set of unmarked boxes in the corner of my office. After spending a few days, or maybe it was weeks, or it might have been a few months, or maybe longer, licking my wounds and apologizing for having failed my artist colleagues, most of whom had been my teachers, and had, over the course of 7 years, had also become friends, and some had become family. I had to ask myself whether we had in fact failed, okay? No home, no money, no future. Is that failure? Some of the outcomes of CCR's work included playing a critical role in shifting the national conversation about how artists might engage with higher education in new ways. In other words, not around the development of new work, not necessarily in the teaching of master classes, but in long-term, sustained engagement. Again, artists as researchers, as well as cultural producers. We brought artists into long-term relationship with more than 2,500 faculty and students across the country, as well as untold individuals representing communities as diverse as those in College Park, Maryland, Minneapolis, Minnesota, and Middletown, Connecticut. Artist projects were as broad on the spectrum as the development of new academic courses across seemingly disparate fields of inquiry to public festivals focused on art and the environment. At Wesleyan University, an entire new interdisciplinary college was created after faculty in the sciences and the humanities worked over an extended period of time with CCR artists. I have boxes of letters from students, scholars, scientists, community members testifying to the value of their engagement with CCR. I could go on. Suddenly, or maybe not so suddenly, when the metric wasn't sustainability or immortality, wait a minute, suddenly that felt a little bit like success. Because we learned, we catalyzed, because we brought people together and created new spaces where ideas flourished, and then spun new ideas and new work and new questions and lots of other new. Spectacular failure.
I'm going to do one thing real quick, and that is say, on the polling, we have one last question, and we only have 3 responses so far, and this is really a great time to ask it. What's been the most inspiring idea you have heard today? So if you have a chance, please go to the poll and put your comments. Yep, go ahead.
My question is for all 3 of y'all. I might be paraphrasing Michelangelo, but he said the greatest danger is not to succeed very high at your highest expectation, but to and not achieve it, but to achieve your low expectations. Do you agree with that? Because I do.
Yeah, I think in some ways what kept the company running in Greenville, South Carolina was a certain kind of agreement to make sure things were done at a certain level. What I think worked well and why when the City Fathers decided to blow up our space to build a hockey stadium because, you know, South Carolina, they're desperate for hockey. It's wrestling on ice. We had worked the material to a degree, and the heart and soul and human experience we had put into the material that we had done, which in many other communities was like, oh my God, you're an Arthur Miller, please, that old stuff. But because it was done the way it was done, and the program we had done that way, when they blew up our building to build a hockey stadium, they were still adamant to make sure when I said, okay, we're going to build a new building, they answered the call. And so we were able to do that. So the expectations in terms of, you know, groundbreaking art in Greenville, South Carolina isn't the same thing as groundbreaking art in other places, but because we had taken it on with a high expectation that we're going to deliver this material to this degree, we became that community's theater. So it's I mean, I guess that's, well, I'm answering the question, but the balance of it is in the mix. So, balance and mix. Yours? You're up.
Well, I would also say that it's partly clarity, right? I mean, it's a mix, and it's also hello. Ghost in the machine. Oh no.
Just use them both.
Okay, sorry. So it's a mix, but it's also about having clarity. What is it that you think you're doing? How do you value what you're doing? How do you talk about what you're doing? And can you refine it to the point that it's just unassailable? And I feel like that's kind of the point that I was getting at with Liz's notion about hierarchy, and not just inverting hierarchy, but just flattening it, right? So if we get away from is it good, is it bad, what are all of the other 6 million things that it could be? And if we could get really clear about that, then I think we can more often than not declare success. But we have to know what it is we're after. So.
Give her the good one. Give her the good
Okay, so what I forgot to say, this is kind of a little bit what you're talking about, is that on that Saturday night, yeah, there was a nice crowd of people and everything, but after it was over, the piece I had done was it was comedic, but it was about feminism, which is kind of tough for a lot of people, and the cutest thing happened. A little 14-year-old skinny white boy came up to me and he goes, "I just wanted to let you know that I'm a feminist," and I was just like, "Well, honey, it was for you then," you know. And like my wife often says, it's for the kids, they're our future and all. So so really, I think that kind of made it really. So failure, success. I felt I guess I'll do it again, so that was the answer. There you go. That was it right there. Next April Fool's Day. Word.
So I have two kind of not that coherent, rambling thoughts in response, but would love to hear your response. One is, I think that you just got to accept that in American culture, nothing succeeds like success. And I think of the Pennsylvania football team where the assistant coach was molesting children for years, but America kind of, we didn't want to acknowledge that, and then when it was acknowledged, you had students on campus who kind of wanted to kill the messenger because they brought this point out. So I think the sort of, how do we define success? Like, American society is pushing this huge rock on you to try to define it a certain way. I guess my other thoughts are, recently in the Houston contemporary dance scene, we've had two really excellent contemporary dance companies that have gone under due to financial pressure. And that makes me sad. But then I think if you look in ballet, there's a history of George Balanchine failing several times in the late 30s, early 40s, failing, quote unquote, with companies that didn't take off. But then he created a company, Ballet Society, which became New York City Ballet, which became one of the most important ballet companies in the world in the 20th century. So I guess I would say, what would you say to the dance lovers in Houston who are mourning the loss of two great dance companies and feeling very pessimistic about, can the city support viable dance companies that put on stage a really strong product?
So I actually, okay, sorry. So I actually come out of the dance world, so my first response is to mourn alongside of you. The loss of a company is a hard thing. That's the disintegration of a certain kind of That's a disintegration of a certain kind of family, and I think it's important to notice. When I was a funder, I worked at a foundation that spent about 10 years working with the symphony orchestras across the United States, a massive program, lots and lots and lots of money. And one of the things that we learned is that while the symphony orchestra, 72 pieces, and all of the infrastructure that goes along with it, that might be going away. Music is not. And certainly classical music is not. So those dance companies, while they lived and were robust and produced a lot of material and artistry and created what hadn't existed before, that hasn't gone away, right? It's fixed a little bit in history, but it still happened. So the fact that particular company isn't going on doesn't mean that work doesn't continue to live in some way, and that dance is in danger. Dance is not in danger. Human beings have been dancing since they've been human beings. So I think if we're talking about aesthetic cup of tea and whether a particular kind of, in dance we talk a lot about genealogy. It's really important to us where everybody came from, who begat who, and then who got together with who, and who had a fight with who, and what part of the body reflected that fight. That's really important to us, but I'm not sure that it's that important to the rest of the world. So we get set in thinking about the indivisibility of the generative artist and the work, right? But I would mourn too. It's it's unfortunate, it's a sad thing, but then celebrate when you're ready to celebrate that dance isn't going anywhere.
Maybe it's just I'm Irish, so I'll do celebrate the life. I mean, we'll mourn, of course, but we'll celebrate the life. But the reason the Sistine Chapel is in Rome is because that's where the money was. It didn't end up in the middle of Germany because there was no money then there. And the reason why NYCB ended up in New York is because that's where the money was. It didn't end up in Kansas City or Peoria. When there's the money and the support to do stuff, the critical mass of money and talent all ends up in a certain place, and abstract expressionism got to happen in New York because Germany was destroyed. So there's a certain kind of happenstance, and I don't know, maybe Detroit will be the place that people go, oh, that's the next place to go because you can afford it. I don't know. If the money doesn't show up on top of all the artists going there, then no, it's going to be Detroit like it's Detroit right now. It's just going to be that's where it's going to go. And the theater scene, Georgia Shakes just died. San Jose Rep, which is in the middle of Silicon Valley, where, come on, those guys have money dropping out of their back pockets in ways they could have just gone into those guys' sofas and pulled the change out and probably stayed intact. But, you know, they went too. And is it the business model? Is it that what you're doing isn't serving the market? Is it, you know, it's the business of art. I would echo, I hope these artists that were part of that company are still within the Houston world and can mix and match and turn into other things. So that would be my hope for the future. But it's all about the Benjamins, the money. Where's the money? And you want to go somewhere else, then you find where the money is, where the folks who will support you. And if you're Van Gogh, then you have a nice brother who takes care of things. And if you're Mozart, you die panning. Listen, somebody hopefully will take care of the work and put it forward, and there your work will be. So it's, I have a T-shirt that says, I'm your reality, that I show to my students on a regular basis, and that's sort of in the mix.
Robert?
Did you want to comment on that? Excuse me.
You could go see other theater companies, or just get really crazy and start your own.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what, I don't know. That's possible.
I was listening to you all, and I recall this quote by Samuel Beckett about failure. I don't remember it now by heart, but he talks about how important it is to fail. So, and to fail boldly. So if you're going to teach a course on failure, what would be in your curriculum?
I just came from class. I mean, it was 11 to 1, and they all crashed and burned, and they were all face planting. And you did this, you tried to do that, it failed. Okay, I'll see you on Wednesday, or I'll see you on Friday, or see you, fix it. And it's fail again, fail better. Yeah, and it's a perpetual gut punch to the soul. I don't know what, and as much as I'm tearing my hair out as I walk across campus to come here going, oh God, what are we gonna do to these kids? Their courage to come back to class is why I come back to class. Because they're ready to go, okay, he just chewed me a new one. And, oh God, I can't believe I put that in front. What was I thinking when I forgot to do that? And I know he told me that 17 times, and now he's going to tell me an 18th. And they're ready to come back in, so me too. And that's with my students, but when I do a play, fortunately, there's a group of people, I hope, this crazy mustaches, because I've just been casting a show, and we'll see if it lasts on Tuesday when the director sees it for the first time and goes, or get that thing off your face. And we're going to put this show in front of people in May, and we hope people will show up, and maybe it'll be like the Swan. 50% will go, that's incredible, and 50% don't ever do that again. And then we go, thanks, and you keep walking. So that's part of the adventure, I think. So.
Just super quickie. Okay. Is anybody here familiar with the saxophonist Rashawn Roland Kirk? Anybody? Thanks, Mary. All right. Okay. Well, Rashawn is a favorite artist of my father's, and so obviously became a favorite of mine. And he has this cassette, and cassette, girl, you old. He has this cassette that we used to listen to in the car, and there was a little bit of rapport at the end of it because he's going into a live thing, and he says, "Bright moments bright moments. Bright moments like making love to a woman on a leaky waterbed in the Holiday Inn. That's a weird thing to hear in the car with your dad. But later in life, what it kind of made me understand is that, okay, if, real basic, you guys, if art is supposed to imitate life, right? Life is not always good, right? So we seek these bright moments, these wonderful moments in time, right? These moments of victory and celebration. And that's what makes it worth, that's what helps us to continue. For instance, like if when I was a teenager and I smelled Nag Champa, the incense Nag Champa, for the first time, I was just like, oh, wow, this smells amazing. I wish that just air smelled like this, right? And then my shitty friend next to me says, yeah, well, if it smelled like that all the time, then you wouldn't even know what it smelled like. And that's true, right? So, so now, when I burn on top and I smell it, I'm like, that still smells so amazing. But I don't burn it all the time because then I wouldn't know. So if you were successful all the time, right, then you wouldn't feel that. You wouldn't have that feeling. And so I think that's what you pull from failure, Yeah, there you go.
So we had Liz Lerman actually at Tisch last week, which is partly why she's on my mind so much. But she was teaching both our graduate students in dance and in a program that we have called ITP, which is intertelecommunication something. Anyway, nobody knows what the original name of it is because nobody likes it, so we just call it ITP. So the dance grads and dance undergrads and ITP grad students were all getting trained in Liz's critical response process. So if those of you who've been through that, basically the bottom line is Liz says if you get feedback that makes you want to go back to work, then it's good feedback, right? So I kind of feel like it's the same thing. If you have an experience that makes you want to go back to work, even if nobody else liked it, nobody else bought a ticket, nobody came, your mom said it sucked, like if it makes you want to go back to work, then you can declare success and you have validated the risk-taking behavior that makes you want to be an artist in the first place, right?
I just wanted to maybe push back a little bit in response to Jack's response to Andrew's question about the two dance companies going under. You say, go where the money is, go where the money is. Hell, if it's not in Houston, where is it? That's the question that I have to ask. We have almost $1 billion in capital campaigns going to arts organizations right now. Yeah. And we did lose those dancers. So I have to ask, go where the money is. Well, it's here.
Yeah, I'm sorry. If I gave you the idea that I was saying go where the money is, that's not what I meant. The money goes where the money wants to go.
Right.
Right. They hired Michelangelo, they didn't hire the other guy.
Well, that's an interesting dilemma for the small,
I agree.
The independent artists and the small and mid-sized arts organizations.
Oh, I agree.
In Houston in particular.
Yeah, we're in a city that has a $13 million Lord Theater. And then the next largest company is just under 2. And they're working they're gliding like this, but their feet underneath are like this. And then there are a whole lot of other small mammals kind of walking amongst the feet of the dinosaurs and hoping they can. Yeah, I agree. There's the corporate sensibilities of this city that wants to have world-class art so that when they go to their corporate meeting in St. Louis or Detroit or Denver, and they can say, yes, we had a production of All My Sons. We did too. You had Pillow Man? We did too. We have a symphony that does Mahler? Yeah, we got that. And so when we got a football team and we got James Harden, and there's a certain kind of, I got to have a belt that has each of these notches on, so when I see the guy from San Francisco, I can go, yeah, I got that too. I'm not defending it. It's just an observation. I'd say it's a condemnation, but it is an observation. It's why Houston is, and if somebody really, really, really thought Shakespeare was important in Atlanta, Georgia, the Georgia Shakespeare Festival would still be alive after doing 2 Hey, We're Going Down campaigns. And I hear you. Houston Shakespeare Festival could use some funding too.
Is Dallas Center Theater still in the room? No, because I think she might have something really interesting to say about about that space between, or the time between when it looks like things are going south and what interventions might be staged in partnership with audiences and with community. And it may be that the time doesn't match up. It may be that that kind of work takes longer than the SOS, but then the question then becomes, I know, it's so weird. It's just like there's like a ghost in there or something. Then if the time doesn't quite match up, then I think the question becomes, why not? What were we not paying attention to, or what did we not see, or what questions were we not asking that might have altered what happened in the next XYZ? Yeah, I mean, I wish she were still here because I think she might have some really good counsel.
I'll throw out one while he's taking the mic over there. One thing when I'm interviewing MFA graduates, students, I go to New York and Chicago and I see 700 people audition. Each of them go by one at a time. They have 3 minutes and it's me and the folks from NYU and the folks from CalArts, and it's sort of like the NFL Combine for actors. And out of those 700, there are a group that I will say, that person looks like they've got a sensibility that might match mine. I like the skill, the talent they're showing in that. So we will sit down and do a callback. I call them back to have more of an interview. But I have 4 questions I ask as part of the interview process. And one is, what is your greatest moment of triumph? What is your greatest moment of defeat? What's the hardest you've ever worked in your life? And what's the note you always get? And sort of leaving the question open enough to go, oh, well, my greatest moment of triumph was when I got the standing ovation and I played the lead and it was great. And that's an answer, and sometimes that's okay as an answer. But I'm much more interested in the moments when they say something else. Oh, the hardest I've ever worked in my life was when I was leaving the show and I had 4 jobs and I was taking an overload. No, and they say, the hardest I've ever worked in my life was when I was helping my dad put fences up out on West Texas. The greatest moment of triumph was when she said yes. And that's all he said. He said, she said yes. And I went, that guy's coming to my program. Because that's all I needed to hear, and the way he said it, what he knew in that, what he was ready to offer in that answer was the kind of thing like, okay, he's ready to put himself on the line just in an answer to that question. And, my greatest moment of defeat was when I went up and saw the cast list and my name wasn't on it. Okay, you need to go over there.
Hi. So the question that I had was, I was very much interested in this idea of how we define success for ourselves. And one of you mentioned the idea of who do you bring to the table, right, to define your success. And I know for myself, I studied in Boston. I had a bunch of wonderful teachers, but a few that they look at my work and define it within a lens of race identity. And I do a painting of a fish. They'd be like, oh, it's a koi fish. Or I see this Zen-like essence. You must have been looking at Orientalist work. Do you like Ong? And I just feel like, what? Like, I don't. Now I know Ong because people kept talking about Orientalist stuff, or this is so anime. And I was like, what anime? What? So to the point that I started to not trust some of the judgment of my professors, and I started researching, well, what do they make? When was the last time that they showed? And that actually started to help me develop how happy are they in their personal lives, how much, so when I went to grad school, I actually did all this research about the teachers, CSI, gonna go through, and really built this table of people I wanted to work with. And I was curious for all of you, how, for you, have you built your table, and what were the trials and errors or tips about how we define success with the help of trusting others?
Okay. The welcome table. Okay. I don't know who said it. I think it's really funny that today everybody's saying, someone said a great quote. I don't remember exactly what it is, but it was great. And there's a lot of that because there's been a lot of, so here goes. There was someone had said this, and it said that you should surround yourself with someone who is working on a higher level than you, and then someone who is working, isn't quite to where you're at, so you can have perspective of where you would like to go, and and then you can teach, right? And teach is to learn again. So to be in that sort of, I'm not going to say I'm in that particular table all the time, but I guess I aspire to be. I do know that as far as like you can be your worst critic, and then also you can be your craziest supporter. So you don't want the whole Michael Jackson thing to happen, right? That's really I should go beyond that, but you don't want to be surrounded by a bunch of yes people who think everything you do is amazing, because it's not true. But you don't want to be around someone every time you do something. They're like, well, you coulda, would have been great if you woulda. Man, that's really frustrating. But personally, when I do film and stuff, I surround myself with people who will do anything. And that's why, when I do the bio, it says, by any means necessary media, because I'd like to surround myself with people who will make art by any means necessary, who are willing to put themselves out there, if it's ridiculous or dangerous. But I would never, ever ask an actor to do something that I wouldn't be willing to do myself. So that's, I guess that, there you go.
Another one of these crazy theater things we do, there's the Southeastern Theater Conference, which is the largest theater gathering in the country. 5,000 people descend on one southern town in a convention center. And it's everything from high school students to college students to professionals to academics reading their treatises on something obscure in theater history and things like that. But walking around, there are people auditioning for summer work usually, and sometimes full year work. And my wife and I would have to grab each other by the elbow and go, that person has no friends. Because if they had friends, they wouldn't allow them to wear that. And they think they're wearing something that is really cool or would be interesting for a company to see them wear to, show themselves off as a creative talent to put on the stage. But no, if they had any friends, someone, no, don't wear that. Don't wear that. And you got to have somebody that you trust enough that will walk up and go, no, you shouldn't be doing that. And knowing that that comment is coming with the care and love and regard for what you have already shared with them about what you're about and what you're trying to do. And so they can be a little bit of a curb of, no, I don't think, no. That you think it's this, but it's really coming off like that. And you're right. The folks who you were talking to originally, they couldn't hear you, or their own imposition of what they think you should be doing or how you should be going. No, wrong people. And these other auditions I do in New York and Chicago, there are some people that are really, really cool, and I think they're neat, and they come and do work, and I go, I'm not the person to train you. You need to go talk to those folks, because you have an aesthetic that does this, and I think that's cool too, but we don't work on that at University of Houston. You should go talk to Arizona State. And I'm hoping they're there with, hoping to share their gifts and grow them. They should go where that's going to work the best for them. And sometimes I'm a pretty direct person. I don't have a big bucket of self-esteem to help sharing with folks on a longer, regular basis. I'm not going to be, the joke is the gentle, nurturing encouragement that I offer on a regular basis isn't as gentle or nurturing and maybe feeling as encouraging as others. And if some folks need that environment, you should go talk to them, because this is how this room works. And it's cool, but finding the people that you can rely on to go, why are you wearing orange, Jack? You know you shouldn't wear orange. This is cool, orange is cool. I'm going to the Dynamo game. Wear the other color.
I'm never going anywhere with you. Wreck my self-esteem in 10 seconds. First of all, I love your question. I think that's a great question. And for anybody who is considering graduate school or who has the capacity to influence someone who's going to graduate school, that is the point of going to graduate school, is to create a table of colleagues and mentors that you can, but nobody tells you that. So you get there, you're floundering around. For me, I bounced around from advisor to advisor. I couldn't figure out what I was doing, but I think your question is so rich. So I'm going to try and give you an anemic response to it, which is that I grew up in a ballet studio. So I grew up being very good at taking direction. I was not very good at asking questions, or I was very good at stifling any questions that I had, because those were not valuable in that context. So I got to be a college student who graduated and went out into the world, and then I worked in theater for a long time, and then I went back to graduate school, and sort of felt like I hadn't really gained, like suddenly I realized I hadn't gotten any farther along. So I was a little long in the tooth before I figured out that the value of what I was doing was my yet untapped capacity to ask questions. So at Tisch School of the Arts right now, we are attempting a pretty paradigmatic shift. We are framing the work of artists as knowledge production. Right? Creative practice is not like research, it is research. It is a form of knowledge production. At the core of that is inquiry, right? So for me, the most important table, and I call them my rabbis, the most important table of rabbis for me are the people around me who are as game to ask questions to which there may or may not ever be answers as I am. And to Stephanie's point, I think asking people who have an infinitely greater capacity and curiosity about asking questions, for me, that's what turns me on, and that's what makes me feel safe, because if there is a question to ask, I never get stuck, right? So there's always some place to go. But your question is awesome. You'd probably be a great person to have lunch with.
Thank you. We've come to the end of session, so let's thank the panelists for a great discussion. We're also at the end of the day with one short sort of gift for the audience right after this. But I do want to say a few thanks before we go. First of all, thanks to all the speakers today who have been really wonderful, and all the participants who have spoken up. Thanks to the team that pulled this all together, the student board and research fellow, the volunteers in the room and on social media, and our fearless leader at the Center for Arts Leadership, Sixto Wagon. Thanks to the funders and supporters, sponsors who are all dutifully listed on the back, and please go through that at some point. And then, that was actually all my thanks. So let's welcome to the stage our final speaker, Michelle Niraim. Is that it? Can we trade out? We're gonna trade. Should we vacate? You want to stay with her? You want us to stay with you? Let's stay with her. We're going to be your doo-wop.
Backup singers.
Let's do it. I'm going to introduce you. It's all right. Michelle Niraim is currently a PhD student here at the University of Houston in creative writing. She holds an MFA from Florida State University. Her essay about the insanity of Florida football appeared on NPR, and this past year she moved to Houston where she's working on her new novel. Michelle was challenged today to do some of this word work. We began with a poet as a keynote speaker, and we thought we would end with some poetic reflections on the day. Please welcome her.
Hello. I am not going to be singing, but basically they got the idea from, I don't know if you guys have ever heard of the Imprint Foundation. Yes, no? If you haven't, you should look them up. They're wonderful. They bring a lot of great readers to Houston. Like they had David Mitchell, Karen Russell. This thing is very tricky. And they do a lot of community work, which is wonderful. And one of the things they're known for doing is they take us art students and they take us out into the community. We do, what's it called? Sunday? I'm new to Houston.
Sunday Streets?
Sunday Streets, yeah. And a bunch of other events. And they set us up at a table with typewriters, and basically people come and they give us words and we write poems for them. And then we give it to them like 15 minutes later. So that's basically what I was tasked to do today, is to take it all in and write a poem about today that basically, engages the audience in a much more personal way. So if it'll let me, there we go. Here it is. Empty buildings line the road like broken teeth, as if to say, art does not live here. But the night, it cracks open like a piñata when that one kid with purpose aims her bat and connects and blasts that paper mache mule into inanimate object heaven. Slipping off her blindfold, blinking at the bright light, at the hollowed out houses and the crumbling concrete, suddenly the color of spilled candy, because in the night, kids signed their names, as if to say, this place is not broken. It is a masterpiece in progress. It is our responsibility. We are our responsibility. There is a man who carries galleries from town to town like a pocket of seeds, and wherever he rests, art grafts to park benches, to sidewalks and strangers. There is a woman in Pakistan who opens her home at night to new ideas and restless longing, shielding that little incandescent flame of revolution in her fingers. Because nothing terrifies a tyrant like art, because he knows the habit of prose to nest in the human heart, because our mother's heart sang an ambiotic lullaby, because you can take away art like you can take away adrenaline and blood. That is to say, you can't. Even in the dark ages, even in the darkest alleys, if you listen, you will hear that rattle and hiss of human spirit. And that's it.
Thank you very much. It's now time to drink. So I invite you all to join us at Mongoose versus Cobra for the Art and Culture Happy Hour. Thank you all very much for being here and being part of this.